Let's start with prayer, and then, hello Judy, how are you? Okay, let's begin with prayer. Father, we thank you for this day. Thank you for your word and the direction you give us, and help us to study it and understand it and to use it to help others in Jesus' name. Now, I want to publicly thank Heather Smith for yesterday and taking over, and I'm sure doing a wonderful job. But I did want to go over one thing before we move on. I know she talked about feelings. That was the topic. And the reason I started with that, when we first started this class, I thought to myself, what is probably the biggest problem that I think people in general, not just women, but maybe women more than men, I don't know, have. And what came to my mind as an overall problem was that they act according to their feelings. And so that's why we're looking at that first. Plus, he does address it some, but actually addresses it later in the book. But one thing I wanted to mention before we go on is that the thing about feelings that is so important, and I'm not sure if Heather mentioned this, is that if you are involved in any kind of secular counseling, typically, and I'm painting a broad brush here, they focus a lot on your feelings. How do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? And the bad thing about that is, when you talk about feelings, I cannot make you feel different. You know, if you say, I've been feeling really depressed, and I can pump you up temporarily and say, oh, but you're a great person, but you're this, but you're that, and the other one for a little while. But really, I can't change the way you feel. I can't just say, well, stop feeling that way. I feel really bad. Well, just quit it. Stop it. And it doesn't work. But when we understand that our thinking drives our feelings, what we are thinking drives our feelings. Now, I can deal with this. And typically, thinking drives the way we feel. We feel what we feel because we think what we think. And so really dealing with feelings it's not really that helpful if that's all I concentrate on. So we need to be in touch. Most people are very much in touch with their feelings. I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that. And they can readily tell you what they're feeling. But we need to be tuned into being in touch with what we're thinking. And my typical example of this is when it snows, and some of you have heard this, when it snows in the winter, and how I feel about it. Well, not anymore really, but when the children were little, I would open the curtains or blinds or whatever, and I would look out, and I would see snow, and I would instantly feel depressed. Why would that be with a bunch of little kids?
Yeah, they're in and then they're out, and then they're back out.
And then they're in, and then they're in, and then they're wet, and then they're
hanging up.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Redress them all. Put them. They go back out.
Okay. Now, what is the event? Snow. Okay. What am I thinking? Exactly what Valerie said. Oh no. This translates into work, mess, mud, etc. Okay. So I'm feeling. Oh. Now, my kids, on the other hand, same event. Same event, open the curtains, look out, snow, and they go, whoopee! Why? Because they're thinking, no school until I tell them, no, you're homeschooled. You got to do it anyway. but I mean, they don't. I let them off because it's worthless to try to make them work on a day like that. So they feel totally different. So we have the same event with totally different feelings coming from them because of the way we think about it. Now, if somebody comes to me and says, now look, just think about this. This is a great opportunity for your kids to do this, and somebody changes my thinking about it, and I say, yeah, you're right. Well, I start to feel better. You see how the way you think drives the way you feel. Now, with women, now this is something I don't think it's quite as much this way with men. Sometimes we feel a certain way, and there is no thinking involved. In other words, all of a sudden, and it has to do with our hormonal fluctuations, particularly when you get a certain age, and all of a sudden you feel like, oh no, everything is horrible. Anybody felt that? Everything's horrible. Okay? And there's no room. And somebody says, well, why? Well, you don't even know. Well, so there are times that our feelings come even when we're not thinking about it. But the same process happens, because what happens is I'm sitting there and all of a sudden I think, oh no, this is going to happen. Then that's going to happen. And then because I feel it. And so I start being driven again by my feelings to not think about things that are true and lovely and honest and good report and all those things. So my feelings are still driving me. They didn't initiate with thoughts. Okay? Did you get my point? The feelings came first. Ordinarily our thoughts came first. Oh no, it's snowing. Then we feel bad. Ordinarily that's what happens. But our feelings might come first, and then we need to learn to say, okay, this is just a feeling. This is not based in reality. And this is where there be a lot of verses on thinking on things that are true and lovely and taking every thought captive and this sort of thing. Okay? Does that make sense?
And
yes.
one thing Cindy Bennett actually pointed out to me, and I've been started doing this, is like if you're irritable or frustrated or just fearful maybe,
okay,
just consciously saying, okay, what am I thinking?
What am I thinking?
Turning those thoughts around, and really, we're usually thinking, well, what if? Just those things that we don't have any control over. We should really focus on the Lord and those,
right,
pure and lovely things, but actually consciously going, okay,
what am I thinking? In other words, what you're saying, identify the thoughts that are driving these feelings, and you're going to be, if you dwell in this area of thinking, then you can identify sinful patterns of thinking and say, because even worrying is a sin. I mean, it's in the scriptures, it's pointed out as a sin. So you can say, okay, no, I'm thinking this, that's not right. I'm going to put that off. I'm going to think right things about, that sort of thing. So that's good. It's the same thing. You're getting in touch, rather than being so much in touch with the way you're feeling and dwelling on that. You're becoming in touch with the way you're thinking. Good. Good. Any other comments on that? I wanted to make sure that you understood that as helpers, we need to dwell in this area, in the area of our thoughts, our conclusions that we're drawing, our thoughts about, generally their bad feelings are generated by erroneous thoughts about God and myself, about the future, about the past, all these wrong thinking. And that's where we have to be willing to examine ourselves and help others examine themselves. Okay, any other comments on that? All right, let's look at our chapters. We'll start at chapter, is it 5? Yes, 5 through 8. Okay. We have chapter 5 on page 33. First of all, before we even go any further, the first one is on presuppositions of counseling. I would encourage you, even if you're not taking the course for credit, that you read through these chapters with underline or put stars by important points that you think are important. Was there anything in this chapter, before I bring up some ideas, that anybody saw as an important point to bring up? Okay, let's look at page 35. There were a couple of things here I thought were worth pointing out. And that is, I like what he says on 35, page 35, towards the end, about 4 or 5 lines up at the bottom. He says that we need to make a point to act meaningfully in the present, precisely towards the orientation for the future. In other words, to have goals. And this is kind of this is kind of preparing us for the idea of hope. I think that's very important. If we look on page, before we go on from that, one of the first verses that I will show someone and have them memorize it, and actually it's in it's your project, is 2 Corinthians 5:9, and many of you are familiar with that. So let's just turn there. 2 Corinthians 5:9. we have here one of our, and I'm going to try, in the past I've had a separate lesson on typical verses to give someone that you, first time you meet with them, the second time. I'm going to try to integrate that in more so that we get a better picture of how to be effective in helping people. And this is a really important verse, 2 Corinthians 5:9. Would somebody like to read that for us? And you have it? Yeah, done that.
Therefore, we make it our aim, whether present or absent, to be well pleasing to Him.
Okay, to be well pleasing to Him. One of the things we really have to keep in mind is that pleasing God has to be your number one goal. And that's what, when he was saying keeping the future in mind, okay, if we keep that in mind, if you don't keep that in mind when you're trying to help people, you end up getting bogged down in little nitpicky problem solving. Come to me and I will fix your problems. That is not your role. Because a lot of times you don't know how to fix somebody's problem. But you can always, in a person's life, even a person who really has got just layers and layers of problems, you can always make them say, what is one thing you can do today that you know will please God? And even if it seems like the thing that won't benefit them at the time, they might say, well, I know this will please God, but if I do that, then this will happen, and that will happen. Well, even if it doesn't seem like it will benefit them at the time, you don't want to get bogged down in those short-term what-ifs. You want to say, what is one thing you can do? And almost everybody, I've never come across anyone that can say, I have no idea how I can please God today. And the thing is, if you do that, if you please God today, and if you please God tomorrow, and if you make sure you do that, then you will end up in the middle of God's will, and your life will be so much better. And it won't be so complicated with so many problems, because so many times we get so bogged down in the little immediate problems. Does that make sense? So, and that happened to me one time when I very first was trying to help this lady with I think it was marriage problems, and I got really bogged down. This was years ago, in trying to fix this, trying to fix that, and I finally realized that we didn't have a goal. Our goal was how to make her life better. That's not a good goal, because you don't know what's going to make your life better. I mean, you know that doing what God wants you to do is going to make your life better. Okay, so that's a really important point there. Any comments on that? So working to a long-term goal takes faith. Without faith, it's impossible to please Him. So that's an important, really important aspect of that. You have to believe what you can't see. And that is, if you please God, eventually He is the rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. So, look on page 37. I thought there was a good comment here also, talking about people who have had nervous breakdowns. What does he say about anybody? People you read. What do you say about a person that's having his nervous breakdowns? He says, they have run out of resources. A lot of the syndromes and things that you see today are physical manifestations of how people deal with problems in their lives. Even the OCD and these kinds of things, that they have stress in their life, they have things they can't handle, so the way they respond to it is by doing this or doing that. Okay, so a lot of those kinds of things, that they have stress in their life, they have things they can't handle, so the way they respond to it is by doing this or doing that. Okay, so a lot of those outward manifestations are the ways people deal with stress in their lives. Instead of saying, okay, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to please God. I'm going to please God and staying on that straight and narrow path. They have all these weirdnesses, ways that they deal with it. So when they run out, his point is, and I think it's true, that a person who has a finally nervous breakdown is a person who's run out of resources. They've tried all these things, and they're realizing they don't work. So, any comments? We need to wake up today. Go on. Anybody? Okay. Now, page 39, get into hope. Now, I mentioned 2 Corinthians 5:9 is an important verse. That was the verse we just looked at about making your goal to please Christ. I would say that's probably, 2 Corinthians 5:9 is probably the second most important verse that I like to drive home to a woman who has a lot of problems, who needs your help. And the first verse would have to do with hope, because a lot of times when women come to you, they've decided they're going to come for biblical counseling. Many times it's their last resort. And they've tried a lot of other things, and it hasn't helped. So they come to you, and the number one thing when somebody comes to you, when they leave you that first time after talking with them, you are not going to be able to sort through all their problems, depending on what the problem is. You may be it's very small. It's kind of a matter of lack of information or something like that. But you're not going to be able, and you shouldn't try to. You can't. It's impossible. But if that person leaves you and has hope, then you've done your job. So hope is just essential. That their hopes, as Adams points out, hopes have been dashed. They've tried this, they've tried that, they failed. And the verse that I like to use, and he has it, actually I think it's a misprint on page 40, he says at about the middle of that first paragraph, he says in Romans 15:14, that's supposed to be 15:4, I believe. But that's our verse. Does anybody have that? Anybody want to read that for us? Romans 15:4. I like to, after I talk to a person, I like to say, nothing you've told me, and this is always true, nothing you told me is, have I said to myself, oh, there are no answers for this woman. This woman, she might as well just throw in the towel. Okay? Everything you've told me, the answer can be found in God's Word. And then would you like to read that verse?
For whatever things are written before were written for our learning, that through the patience and comfort of the Scriptures might have hope.
There you go. Through patience. What is patience? What does that indicate? It might take a long time. Yeah, long suffering when you have patience with a person, but if you have patience and comfort of the Scriptures, that means patience means you've got to be willing to wait. And comfort of the Scriptures. God gives us comfort. So this is a key verse. And another way, I'm going to pass these out. He makes several mentions. Several times he mentions the PDI. This is what we call the personal. You have to do this pass this back. Many of you have seen this. Of course, it's pink because it's the ladies' one. This is what we use for PDI, and the reason I'm passing it out now is I think one of the things that helps to give a person hope is when you ask them a lot of questions. Because I think when you do that, you're showing, first of all, you're showing interest, plus you really are showing that you're interested in solving problems and being able to digest their situation and give a biblical viewpoint of it. If you'll look through our inventory, this is particularly for women because you notice we have all of the demographic information. I do not ask every question. I never ask a woman how much she weighs. I mean, that's I don't want anybody asking me, but I will ask, have you lost any weight or gained any weight recently, and that sort of thing. One of the reasons we ask these questions that seem to be kind of not even part of the problem. The person's thinking, what does this have to do with my problem? Is because in Proverbs, there's a verse that says, and I think is it 18? I can't remember the reference, 15, something like that. It says that it's a fool who answers before he hears the whole matter. So you want to ask every question you possibly can so that when you get to the point where you're trying to evaluate the person, where they're coming from, what their problem is, that you don't say something really ridiculous because you've missed something. Now you might always miss little things, but hopefully this inventory covers a lot of different areas. And you notice, for instance, this is something that Lynn suggested on the back side of the front. It says, have you ever, second line, have you ever been pregnant, number of pregnancies, number of live births? Because there have been times, we didn't have this on ours because I was using a generic one. And by the way, this is adapted. There's one in the back of your book. This is adapted from the one in the back of your book. But I've gotten to the end of something and then found out 2 or 3 weeks later that this woman had had 2 or 3 abortions. And that really affects what the problem, how you view the problem. So there are certain things you want to know about her as far as her marriage and children, that sort of thing. Plus, I always forget names, so it's easy to say, well, to remember her daughter or son, to ask questions and use their name, and you've got it all written down here. But then on the back, the very last page, what is the main problem as you see it, or what brings you here? Here are some open-ended questions that you need to ask, and just be quiet and let the person answer. What have you done about it? We're going to talk about prayer in a minute because it's one of your chapters. Almost everyone will say, well, I prayed about it, which is a good thing. We all are for prayer, definitely. But what often happens is that a person prays but doesn't really do what God has said to do. So in other words, I'm talking to God, telling him about my problem, but I'm not giving God the opportunity to talk to me and tell me what to do. I'm telling God what I'm going to do. You see, so that a lot of times is a problem. What are your expectations? I don't usually say, well, what do you want me to do? That sounds kind of harsh. I don't usually even ask that, but I'll say, well, tell me why you would come here. Why would you come to this place? You don't know me or whatever. Why would you, I'll ask them something like that. And then this is very important. Is there any other information that I should know before I start talking to you about some of the struggles you're having? So that is a very, very important question. And sometimes after the end, and this will take probably 45 minutes to really go through, at the end of that, they might drop a bombshell on you. Oh yeah, by the way, and you're like, whew. If so, then you just leave it and say, okay, we'll talk about that next time. This is really important. There was one time, maybe a couple of years ago, that a friend or an acquaintance drove down here from a couple hours and brought a girl in because she had some struggles, and we had like 30 minutes. My husband had like 30 or 45 minutes, and they had to drive back. That's all we had. So it was like, this is really, he questioned her as much as he could. Mainly talked about her problem, gave her some thoughts on it, and then they said, oh, they had to leave. They got ready to leave, and as she was standing in the office, and I said, tell me where you're from, and she told me, and I said, and I can't remember the exact details, but I said something like that. Oh, now, did your parents sit there? And she said, oh, no. I said, my dad shot my mom. And I was there, I saw it. We didn't even get it in questioning. Is that significant? That is significant. Okay, this girl, I'm not saying it means she's a victim and she'll never be able to function. I don't mean that, but I'm saying that is significant. That when she told me that, my heart, I said, that is so significant. I don't know what word I use. It is so important. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. And I felt like saying, come back in here, but it was too late, and we had talked to her. To me, it made all the other little problems look so petty. I thought, man, it's the biggest thing. And a lot of her life was, and it made sense, a lot of her life was behaviors that she had adapted to her life to make her be able to cope with this whole situation. So, PDI is very, very important. Any questions on the PDI? Not inspired, it can be changed. I give this to people, because like we adapted it, like I said, from the one that it's in the back of it. I think it's in one of the indexes of this book. All right. Let me see. 39. Hope. Confident expectation. We won't spend a lot of time on this, but if you want to write down a couple of verses, Romans 15:4, as we just talked about, hope. Another good verse that I eventually bring in, use over and over again, is 2 Peter 1, 2, and 3. That's, anybody know that verse offhand? According to his divine power has he given us all things that pertain to life and godliness. We need to give hope, and you know, you have to believe, in order to give hope to somebody else, you yourself have to believe what you're saying. You have to believe that God has given us everything for life and godliness in his word. And if you can communicate that to someone else, that gives a great deal of hope. Because the person says, wow, there are answers. There, and it's here, and there's hope in the word. And so that is a wonderful verse for that. In Hebrews 6:19, I don't necessarily use this verse, but I think it's interesting that Hebrews, you know, talks about, the theme of Hebrews is the superiority of Christ. And throughout the whole book of Hebrews, it's talking about Christ is better than the angels. Christ is better than this. Christ is better. And it talks about hope. It talks about God's promise of the seed of Christ, and his promise of Melchizedek, all this concerning Melchizedek. And then he says in Hebrews 6:19 that this gives a hope that's an anchor for the soul. I thought, wow, that is really awesome to think of, the fact that a person who has hope has stability. What do you think of when you think of an anchor? What do you think of when you think of an anchor?
Secure.
Security, not moving, right? Is that what you were going to say?
Not susceptible to the wind.
Right. Having a permanent, like, you always hear these jokes about the fisherman who finds a good fishing spot, so he, you know, puts an X on the water and then, you know, goes and he says, I'm going to go back to that spot. Well, that's crazy. That's stupid because, of course, you know, it doesn't matter what you put the X with, you know, it's going to go. There's no objective, firm point, you know, that you can go. It's not like a buoy where it anchors to the soil and then it stays in that one place. And that's how the word is. It's an anchor to the soul. Hope. Very, very important. Okay. Any questions? All right, move right along. I thought the next, and I'm just pointing out what I thought was important, significant. 46. Page 46. Page 44 is where he talks about the PDI a lot. Page 46, I think, something very significant here is that in the second full paragraph after how to give hope, he says, one way to raise hope is by taking people seriously when they talk about their sin. What is he talking about here?
When someone says I'm a lousy mother,
There you go.
not just pass over it, but to ask them, well, why do you, what is it that makes you think you're a lousy mother?
Exactly. And he gives a great example in here. Somebody says, oh, I'm just a terrible wife. I'm a terrible wife. I'm this, I'm that. And the first tendency, because you see this person is hurting, the first tendency is to prop this person up. Oh, no, you're not. Look at what you did here. Look at what you did here. Don't do that. That doesn't give hope, because that person knows. No, I'm a lousy wife, I'm a lousy mother. So I think one of the, sometimes I think learning how to help other people is almost like learning how to go act exactly opposite of what you would do naturally. Okay? Instead of naturally trying to prop up a person like you, because that's just what you want to do, you take this person seriously. What is it that you're doing right now, or what is it you have done that makes you say that you're such a terrible mother? You must have done something. And I think that you tell me, why would that give hope as you think about this whole concept that we were talking about of feelings? Think about that.
think there's reason to change if you
Change
brought
what?
up a specific sin.
If I say, "Oh, you're not a terrible wife. You're a terrible mother. Look at what am I doing? Trying to change the way she what feels about herself." You see how the focus is on feelings? I hate to see anybody feel bad. I really do. But if I say, "Oh no, you're this," and I'm propping her up, I'm directing right here. Remember our overhead. I'm directing all of my energies to this, to the way she feels. And I'm trying to, by my propping her up, make her feel better. But if I say, this actually could say because I may be doing. if I focus my efforts on what she is actually doing and thinking and all that, or thinking that's resulting in her doing, and then it gives hope. Because you can change that. You can change what you're doing and thinking. You can't change it.
And you're pumping her up is temporary at best. So
there you go.
Because when you're not there to do that, then it's going to be.
There you go. Pumping her up is temporary at best. Exactly. Same way with children. Don't want to pump up your children, because there's going to get to the point in their lives where they're in a job or wherever where there's nobody to pump them up. How are they going to cope when they are so needy and they have to have somebody right next to them saying, "Oh, but you're so great. You are so wonderful. You're the best." And instead they have a boss saying, "Well, you messed up," or whatever. Okay? That's where that can be really actually detrimental. Good. Any other comments on that? Taking people seriously. Yes.
I had an adult actually say that to me once. Her mother had always told her she was wonderful. And she actually said, "I wish she'd never kept telling me that," because then over the years, it just, she just was always craving someone to pump her up.
Right. And she's probably wondering why her husband didn't
And
always...
then she's irritated to everything.
Excuse me?
She can be irritated at you if you don't.
If you don't. So what she's doing is she's become very needy. She needs the people around her to pump her up and to make her feel good. And the bad thing about it is people who are like that, who have, and I don't know, whatever reason they're like that, are usually the worst about pumping up others. In other words, they're very critical. Well, she didn't even tell me thank you, or she didn't ever do this to me, or she didn't, and they have a huge blind spot that they are so concerned with their own feelings, self-esteem, that they're not going around encouraging other people. They're worse than the people that they're critical of. Do you get what I'm saying? Usually they're the worst ones. The people who say, "Oh, why didn't you call me? Or why didn't you write me? I've been waiting," or whatever. And they're always, have you ever had someone, a friend that did that? You just want to say, "Go away from me!" Because they're like, "Well, I've been waiting." I speak to them, "I've been waiting for you to call me," and stuff. Usually they're the worst ones about calling others when they're in need. And that's just been my observation. I'm not sure exactly why that is, other than the fact that they're very self-focused. It's all about me as the center and of the universe, and everyone else is around me to prop me up. And so I don't need to prop anybody up. They just need to prop me up. Good comments. So, anything else on hope? Very, very important. And then as we get into prayer, of course, prayer is critical as well, as long as we don't use it as a crutch for not doing what we're supposed to do. And that's the point he makes on page 50, towards the end of the page, one paragraph up. He says there are these two dangers to be avoided in counseling that are connected with abuse of prayer, depending on prayer alone, when the scriptures direct additional action, and turning prayer into a self-pity session. I think I like his example about the guy who says, he says on the next page, you don't pray, give me this day my daily bread, and then just sit back and wait for it to come out, wait for the food to come out of the sky, right? You say, give me this day my daily bread. Father, please provide for me. And then you go out and work. Or look for a job and trust that he would provide for it. Okay? Any comments? Now, in chapter 8, we get into the concept of reconciliation. If you want to read more on this, really very good and thorough book on this, Ken Sande's The Peacemaker is excellent. We also have some new books, Peacemaking for Women, which I haven't read. I have it, and Peacemaking for Families. But The Peacemaker is just a really good book on reconciliation and the dynamics of peacemaking. And he makes the point that you need to be a peacemaker, not a peace faker. Okay, and actually, Adams talks about this. He doesn't call it that, but on page 50, we'll skip a little to 59. He gives a scenario about the person who gossiped and the apology, and he says, on the second paragraph, he says, the apology seems insincere, but nothing is said about the sin. Well, it's too much to read over again, but the point is this. We're going to talk about the difference between apology and asking forgiveness, but be sure that when you're dealing with people, and if somebody is thinking that you have offended them and you really haven't, and that maybe they're just judging you or whatever, don't apologize don't ask forgiveness and say, well, if I have offended you, would you please forgive me? Don't say that, okay? Because that's peace faking. That really is insincere. And I will tell somebody, I'm really sorry that you thought that. It makes me feel bad. But why would I not want to ask forgiveness for something if somebody says, I'm really offended that you did such and such and I didn't do it? And I say, well, I really want to ask your forgiveness if you were offended, but I didn't. Why? What's the problem with that? Probably several. Anybody?
Supporting the wrong thinking?
Yeah, supporting the wrong thinking. Probably in a lot of cases, and my husband and I were just talking about this recently, I cannot compete with your imagination. And you cannot compete with the imagination of other people. Do you know what I'm saying? If they imagine you, oh, she did that because she meant that, she probably was thinking that. You cannot compete with that. The imagination is endless. I can think of an endless number of things that you all are thinking right now. She's probably thinking, boy, she is ugly, or whatever. I can think, boy, that Penny, she is so rude. She was thinking, You can't compete with that because I can think so many things. So a lot of times that's what offenses stem from. Our imagination is rude. And that's why Adams talks about loose ends. What does he mean by loose ends? In other words, when we talk about offenses, true offenses. If I truly do offend Catherine, I say something to her, like, I don't know. I don't think of anything. But, because I might offend her. But what if I do say, let's say we're back in the office and I say something to her, and I go, you came to church dressed like that? Or something like that, okay? That's a good one. Are you offended yet? Okay, she's offended. Good. So that's a good example. Or I say something like that, it's just the two of us. Okay. What is Adams talking about when he talks about loose ends? Anybody know? When we go into service, she's pretty irritated, okay, because I was pretty rude. So what would make her feel better? tell one of her friends, what would make you feel better, Catherine? Be honest.
He said,
No, I see the death, so I feel. What do people typically do to make themselves feel better when they tell their friends? Please pray for Gretchen. You know what she says. And so what you have here is you have a loop, and the offense was first between me and Catherine, okay? And Catherine, to feel better, because she's such a sinner, just offended her again. That's two in front of everybody. That was worse. She goes outside and tells her friend, okay? And her friend goes and tells a couple of her friends. And I heard somebody compare it one time to opening up a feather pillow and just letting all the feathers go. Because what happens is, I get really convicted and I think, I cannot believe I said that to her. That was wrong. That was just cold, you know. And so I go to her in tears and I say, Catherine, God has convicted me. The truth is, I was jealous because I liked your dress. And so I said that, and it was wrong, and it was carnal, and would you please forgive me? And so Catherine forgives me, and she's feeling pretty good about it. What about all these people out here? You might know about this one, and if she's a spiritual girl, and she is, so she's going to go to her friend and say, you know, I just want you to know she did ask forgiveness. And so this girl's taken care of. Maybe she's still thinking I'm pretty rotten for doing it to begin with. But what about all these people out here holding grudges, becoming bitter? Okay, that's what I said. It's like letting a feather pillow go. I mean, it goes, and by the time it comes out here, I mean, the offense is totally different. It's even worse. Okay, because it's changed, and it's been, you see? So when he talks about loose ends, well, first of all, this is talking about keeping the circle as small as possible. But loose ends also has to do with when this is open, when there's an offense, and I need to close it up. I need to say, would you forgive me? And she has an obligation when I ask forgiveness to forgive and to cover it and say, and you know, I do the same thing sometimes. I make comments, and so I need to learn to forgive and take care of it. And it's taken care of when it's that small, and it's so much easier. So many fewer problems, okay?
I was going to say too, it seems like a lot of times when somebody comes to you with a heavy offense or something that wasn't legitimate, it's probably not the issue. It's probably maybe something you've done previously, or that's not the real thing you did that hurt them, but they don't want to come right out and say what it really is.
That's a good point, that sometimes the presenting problem is not really the problem at all. So, a very hard thing to say to someone is if they come to you with a presenting problem that really offended me when you do that, it's good to ask questions, what exactly I did, and if there is an offense, to ask forgiveness. If there's not, to say, you know, I am so sorry that you viewed it that way, I really am. It makes me feel bad, but there was no offense because maybe they misunderstood something. And then the hardest thing to say is, now look, is there anything else? That is really hard because you are really opening yourself out. Is there anything else? Please tell me. But I think that is a way of showing someone that you're very sincere about whatever it is about making it right. And also be open to the fact that the person, there could be some truth. When they come to you and there's been offense, there could be some truth to it. And be willing, even if you say, well, I didn't mean that. If some people say, well, God knows my heart. I say, yeah, but I know what you did. I don't know your heart, but I saw what you did. You know, so you may not think that, well, I didn't mean to. But if you did something that was offensive, you still need to ask forgiveness for it, even though you think in your heart you did it with pure motives. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because we don't even know our own hearts. And if you did something, sometimes, I'll be honest, sometimes I'll say things and do things, and then somebody will say something, I'll think, I cannot believe I just said that. I cannot believe that was so blind. I wasn't even thinking about their feelings. I wasn't even thinking about their background. I wasn't even thinking, and even though I really didn't mean to, I need to ask forgiveness. Would you forgive me for that? that was just unfeeling. That was just an unthinking comment. So you don't have to think that your heart was behind it in evil intent, you know. But you do have to, so do ask forgiveness where it's due. Do ask forgiveness where it's due. But don't be asking forgiveness for misunderstandings and judgments another person is making on you. Okay, does that make sense? Very, very important, important concept there. Okay, page 59. False apologies. Okay, any other questions on this? On reconciliation, discipline? The idea of reconciliation, and we're going to get, actually there's a whole chapter on it, chapter 9. But I don't know if y'all have seen, most of you have seen Mr. Murphy's demonstration on the thieves of Christ's death on the cross and the thieves. That's a beautiful picture of reconciliation. That's what the idea of the word, if you look it up, is the word reconciliation means an exchange. An exchange. And what has happened here was that when Christ's righteousness was placed on the thief that believed, and the thief's sins were placed on Christ, there was an exchange, not only of in that sense, but there was an exchange of relationship of hostility to a relationship of peace. And that's what we have. That's what true reconciliation is. It's having, say, back to the offense thing, I've offended, and now after I've offended, there's kind of a relationship of hostility. And we need that can't go on in the church. That's what ulcers are made of. That's what, sickness and a lot of this sin is made of. So it's really important to try as much as possible to keep those, exchange and keep the relationships peaceful, and exchange hostility with friendship, and we are the body of Christ, right? So we can all be functioning effectively. All right. Any questions? Our time is up. Any final comments? Anything else I need to know? And that's one thing too. I'll just notice it now. After I've met with somebody, I always try to remember, and I'm sure I don't remember every time, but I try to remember after every time I say, is there anything else you need to say? Is there anything else you haven't said you wish you had? And that's an important question too, because there may be something that people are holding back, and that would be just what they need to give you more information that you need. Okay. Comments?
I was to say, another thing with the reconciliation, it can be also hard when you are on the outside, if someone doesn't have the confidence or something to come to you and approach you, but they have let the word out, to directly go and deal with the issue instead of just spreading it further.
That's a very good point. So let's say you're out here and you find out that this person has spread stuff, so then what's your responsibility? To go directly to them. And one important thing too is don't accuse people, because it could be that you have it wrong too.
Right.
It could be this person didn't do it at all. And that is a hard thing, because your imagination, they can't compete with your imagination either. And you can't compete with their imagination. So that's why when you go to a person, you say, this is happening. So-and-so told me this. Can you tell me what's going on, rather than you've been spreading. When you do that, you're just as bad as they are.
Or just telling other people.
Or just tell other people. Yeah. It's so easy, and that's what we want to do. Just tell other people. It makes you feel better. Kind of dump it on somebody else. So that's a very, very good point. That everyone has responsibility, whether you made the offense or whether somebody has offended you, to go and make this exchange. Relationship of hostility to friendship, back to friendship. Good. Any others? All right, let's pray. Father, thank you for this, your word and your ways that are so far above our ways. I ask that you bless the service now, bless our time together.